all grew up with Disney, right? The Disney Channel.
You're watching Disney Channel.
You know, one of the reasons that we all look back so fondly on Disney is how it opened up our imaginations to what was possible. The crazy characters in Disney's lineup could do anything, and it opened our eyes up to the fact that we too can do anything. I could be a chef. I could be an astronaut. I could be the President of the United States. I could be a Nazi. I could be a musician. Wait. Hold on. A dog playing the saxophone? That would never happen. What? Did you think I was gonna say a Nazi duck was unrealistic? Have you seen ducks before? If anything, Nazi ducks was the most realistic thing that Disney ever created. But maybe you wanna know why Donald Duck, a beloved Disney character, is canonically a Nazi in this image. And no, that's not a doctored image. That is really an official Walt Disney World creation depicting Donald Duck hailing Hitler. How and why did this happen? And why did I stumble upon this? Let's rewind a little bit. The story begins in my home as I'm folding clothes. To counteract the unbearable mental anguish of putting clothes away, I normally put on some music, and lately have been in the mood to discover some of those fabled golden oldies. So I had Apple Music play me a playlist of hit songs from the 1940s, and it was all innocent enough. I found myself jiving with the cool jazz rhythms of yesteryear until a funny sounding song started to play. And then a man starts singing some strange lyrics.
When the Führer says we is the master race, we heil, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace, so we heil, right in the Führer's face.
I could not believe my ears. Here I am innocently listening to 1940s hits, and I accidentally stumbled across the white supremacist portion of the internet. The song must have been some sort of German hit or something. So I go online and I try to find out why I was just listening to a song that wants me to heil Hitler, and wait, what the heck is this with Donald Duck? And hey, there's that image of Donald Duck as a Nazi, and down here, this isn't some German hit. This song was the #3 song on the United States charts. A song that literally says that we should heil Hitler is #3 in the United States of America at the time of World War II. That would be like a song glorifying Osama bin Laden playing on repeat on Y100 right after September 11th. The #3 song at that time was Where the Party At, by the way, an old banger. So this song about Hitler was as popular as Where the Party At. What on earth is going on? We're gonna have to rewind even further back. Like all the way back. Even further, all the way to 1940s America to tell the story of how we got here. So back in December of 1941, during the height of World War II, Japan conducted the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it kind of changed American history irreversibly. The attack forced America, who was sitting on the sidelines, kind of playing both sides, to formally enter the war effort against Hitler and the Axis powers. And it escalated World War II to a conflict the scale of which had never been seen before and has not been seen since. So obviously, after we entered the greatest conflict humanity had ever known, certain things changed in our society. Even though a lot of those changes didn't exactly coexist with those American principles of freedom that we were famous for. On June 13th, 1942, 6 months after the United States formally entered the Second World War, President Roosevelt started a new agency to be known as the Office of War Information. Now, Roosevelt claimed to have good motivation for starting this brand new agency. First off, a big chunk of the American public was totally in the dark about World War II. Remember, this isn't the social media age. It's not even really the TV age just yet. Most people are still getting most of their information through a few newspapers and radio stations, and these local papers and radio stations they don't have boots on the ground in Europe to let Americans know what was actually happening over there. So you had this huge portion of the population in America that was like,
wait, we're at war? Why are we at war? Didn't Japan attack us? Why are we fighting Germany? Why are we in Africa? What the heck happened here?
Then there were other portions of the population who actually read the major newspapers and listened to national radio stations and maybe even had a TV to watch one of the few news channels of the time. But even those people seemed to be confused. It seemed like a New York newspaper was saying something different than the San Francisco radio station, which was different from the Washington, D.C. report on TV. All of this information for Americans, many of whom had their sons out there literally fighting and dying, and then there were all these conflicting, confusing reports. It just didn't sit well with the American public. So Franklin D. Roosevelt did something sort of radical and unprecedented and started this Office of War Information. But the press was scared. This Office of War Information was supposed to work hand in glove with them to make sure that they spread the correct information.
You can't be spreading misinformation,
said Uncle Sam.
That would be damaging to the United States war effort.
To the press, that sure sounded like,
yeah, we're actually going to vet and control everything you say to make sure it's in line with what we want the American public to know.
Congress was also scared of this new agency. They saw this as propaganda. It wasn't the free press anymore. It was the United States government spreading propaganda to the public to get the public to act the ways it needed to in order to win this war. And it wasn't just Congress that called this propaganda. The press called it propaganda. The public called it propaganda. Hell, the leader of the Office of War Information himself called it propaganda. The leader, by the way, was a man named Elmer Davis, who was quoted as saying this about the Office of War Information's role in regulating movies. Quote, "The easiest way to inject a propaganda idea into most people's minds is to let it go through the medium of an entertainment picture when they do not realize that they are being propagandized." Yeah, that man was in charge of what gets said and doesn't get said on public airwaves in a country that supposedly had free speech. But more on that in a second. Back to Roosevelt, who starts this controversial agency, and he gives this thing a mission, which is to, quote,
formulate and carry out through the use of press, radio, motion picture, and other facilities, information programs designed to facilitate the development of an informed and intelligent understanding at home and abroad of the status and progress of the war effort and of the war policies, activities, and aims of the government.
He also gives the leader, Elmer Davis, this specific mission to, quote,
take an active part in winning the war and in laying the foundations for a better post-war world.
So let's talk about how this Office of War Information accomplished their mission during their first big test. Alright, let's play pretend for a second. Pretend that you're the President of the United States of America. I'm going to give you a situation and a couple of options for how to respond. The Japanese government has just sent their armies across the Pacific to your homeland, killing 2,500 of your citizens. Do you, A, declare war on the country of Japan and eventually nuke their people in retaliation? B, destroy everyone who declares an allegiance with Japan? Or C, force every American of Japanese descent to leave their homes and relocate to a desert in Nevada where they can be monitored by the United States Army? If you chose any of these options, you'd actually be absolutely right, because America chose all of the above.
Hey, am I gonna get any money for this?
It's that last one that was particularly difficult for Americans to swallow. And we are live. Hey, what's happening, chat? Yeah, I'm not just a time traveler or a game show host. I'm also a streamer. So before we get going with the rest of today's video, I actually wanted to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, which is no one. Have you guys ever wanted to make a truly great YouTube video and you decide to pour a bunch of your time and effort and money into this project, this passion project of yours, all without any support? Well, that is where today's sponsor comes in. If you're making YouTube videos, don't worry about it. No one will support you. Whatever content you're into, whether that is historical content, educational content, video game streaming, whatever, React channels, no one will be interested in what you are making. And so, if you are that person, I've got this crazy, if you use code Eddie Gates, they're gonna give you an infinite free trial of no one today. Okay, no, but seriously, guys, take a look at my subscriber count right now, all right? At the time of recording this video, I have less than 300 subscribers. So the real sponsor of today's video is you guys who show me any amount of support by liking, viewing the whole video, commenting, or sharing the video. I really would appreciate it if you guys can help me get to that goal of being able to monetize this channel so that I can make even more awesome content for you guys. So please help me out. And anyways, now back to the video. Right, so back to what we were talking about. The American people had a big problem ingesting what we were doing to the Japanese people. I mean, we were legitimately targeting every Japanese immigrant, which I'm not saying is okay, but I mean, for the time period, it was to be expected with how people were. But here was the crazy part. We didn't just target Japanese immigrants. We targeted American citizens, like actual Americans who happen to be of Japanese descent. If you happen to look Asian, I mean, you were basically going to be put under a microscope. And even worse, if you lived on the West Coast, then the American military was going to come in there and force you to sell your home, sell your business, uproot entirely, get into buses, and be shipped off to the middle of a desert so that you could be constantly surveilled by the United States military. That whole fiasco, it was known as the Japanese internment camps. And it sounded eerily similar to what Germany was doing with the Jews in their concentration camps, targeting people based almost exclusively on race and forcing them to leave their communities behind and to live excluded from society is not a great look. Historically speaking, this is probably one of the worst things that America has done to its citizenry, but America really wanted to portray this as a positive and necessary action. And so we're going to take a look today on this stream at one of the first major pieces of propaganda that the Office of War Information ever created, a film called Japanese Relocation. All right, let's go ahead and press play.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our West Coast became a potential combat zone.
Alright, quick note, that's actually Milton Eisenhower. Just a quick historical fun fact. That is the brother of future President Dwight Eisenhower who's making this video.
Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry. But no one knew what would happen among this concentrated population if Japanese forces should try to invade our shores. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move. So as a first step, all Japanese were required to move from critical areas such as these. But of course this limited evacuation was a solution to only part of the problem.
You'll notice that a lot of the American propaganda of this time is going to be very, very subdued in the way that it describes the actions that America is taking, as if like none of this is as big of a deal as what it is, or is as inhumane as what it very clearly is.
Your problem, the uncertainty of what would happen among these people in case of a Japanese invasion, still remained. Immediately the Army began mapping evacuation areas and for a time encouraged the Japanese to leave voluntarily. But trouble for the voluntary evacuees soon threatened in their new locations. So the program was quickly put on a planned and protected basis. Thereafter, the American citizen Japanese and Japanese aliens made their plans in accordance with Army orders.
So in other words, hey, Uncle Sam tried to tell you guys, hey, why don't you voluntarily sell your house and move somewhere else? Like, why don't you voluntarily sell your business? But the Japanese people kind of like didn't all 100% get on board. So Uncle Sam was like, you know what? We're going to take the word voluntary out of this and we're just going to force you to move.
Notices were posted. All persons of Japanese descent were required to register. Government agencies helped in 100 ways. They helped the evacuees find tenants for their farms. They helped businessmen lease.
I love this. I love how they're portraying the American government as being so helpful because they forced you to leave your home, which you bought legally and you did nothing wrong in. And they're forcing you to leave, but the American government is so helpful because they're at least helping you sell the place that they're forcing you to evacuate from.
The evacuees cooperated wholeheartedly. The many loyal among them felt that this was a sacrifice they could make in behalf of America's war effort.
This is so crazy, guys. I mean, like, we're talking about America here, and they're literally putting people inside of buses and shipping them who knows where.
Santa Anita Racetrack, for example, suddenly became a community.
It's so dystopian to see, like, all of these houses that were built up by the army. Like, look how many things there are there. There must be like 100,000 people in this one little community in the middle of a desert.
They issued their own newspaper, organized nursery schools, and some made camouflage nets for the United States Army.
Of course, we're going to highlight when they do something good for the U.S. Army.
Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and elsewhere, quarters were being built where they would have an opportunity to work and more space in which to live.
That's so sad. So sad to see all these people leaving like that.
They opened advanced Americanization classes for college students, who in turn would instruct other groups.
An advanced Americanization class? That sounds like a brainwashing class.
Their parents, most of whom are American citizens, and their grandparents, who are aliens, immediately wanted...
That is a crazy statement. Like, I want you guys to really try to appreciate what they're saying here. The kids are American citizens, their parents are American citizens, and the Japanese immigrants are actually on that third generation up. So in other words, you're punishing 3 generations, 2 of which are actually American citizens, just for the crazy crime of looking Asian.
We are setting a standard for the rest of the world in the treatment of people who may have loyalties to an enemy nation.
We're setting a standard here.
Protecting ourselves without violating the principles of Christian decency. And we won't change this fundamental decency no matter what our enemies do. But of course, we hope most earnestly that our example will influence the Axis powers in their treatment of Americans who fall into their hands.
So according to this film, the Japanese immigrants and the American citizens of Japanese descent, they all left voluntarily and cheerfully. They departed from their homes to go live in the middle of a desert next to 40 million other people, which we all know is not true. We all know that that's just American propaganda speaking. But one of the other important notes there is that it seems like America at this time wanted, they wanted brownie points. They wanted a cookie because their internment camps for the Japanese wasn't as bad, I guess, as the concentration camps for the Jews. It's as if Uncle Sam was there like, well, at least we're not gassing the Japs to death. And like they wanted some sort of credit for at least not killing the Japanese people. If you are comparing your human rights and values to Nazi Germany, you're probably setting an extraordinarily low bar here. But the entire goal of the film was to confront that negative publicity head on. You see, America was aware of two things here, okay? Number one, the Japanese internment camps are a severely bad and hypocritical look, okay? If you're gonna call yourself the land of the free, but then you do this to your own citizens, it doesn't look very free to anybody who's actually paying attention, okay? And so they understand that forcing people to leave their homes and then sticking them into a desert where Big Brother can constantly surveil them, they know that that's a bad look. And it's not like they haven't done crap like this before in the past. It's not like they haven't done crap like this since. I'm not saying America is blameless over here, okay? America understands also that normally when stuff like this happens, they need to try to sweep it under the rug and hide it somehow. However, they also understood point number two, which is that this was way too big of an operation to be able to hide from the American public. Okay, this was literally affecting tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and you cannot force hundreds of thousands of people to leave like essentially one city off the West Coast and stick them in the middle of a desert and say, oh, I don't know, that never happened. Like, America knew that they had to confront this thing and try to put lipstick on a pig. And you know what? It kind of worked. Americans were way too focused on the atrocities abroad and overseas to be focused on any of the more minor atrocities that were happening domestically. And so the Japanese relocation kind of went off without a hitch, and not that many people at the time actually complained about it. The Office of War Information had released successful American propaganda. And so with that, they trudged onwards to create even more content for the lucky viewers in the United States. But for that, I'd actually let's watch the news. Good evening, America, and welcome to Channel 3 News, where we will be discovering and exploring more of the Office of War Information's budgetary films. Emblematic of what they would create was a short news show known as United News that had this very nifty patriotic introduction song. Every episode of the news show would begin with this title screen displaying what topic would be covered throughout the video. Each video was approximately 10 to 15 minutes in length and featured footage that was directly from the front lines of World War II. By the way, if you're a fan of World War II content and material, I mean, these United News shows are really cool, really amazing to look at, and they're all available in the public domain. As a matter of fact, most of the things that I'm mentioning in this video are. So if you want to see the United News shows or anything really that I've mentioned throughout the course of this video, links are in the doobly-doo below. So, yeah. Anyway, These news clips featured an announcer who would dramatically announce all of the United States victories in short-form storytelling fashion.
From Suribachi's 500-foot elevation, enemy mortars hold the entire island in range. The Navy backs up land artillery, giving cover to the 40,000 Marines fighting on shore.
Beyond having incredible footage, this newsreel was meant to update American citizens on what was going on abroad, and specifically to portray the Americans as nothing but absolute heroes.
With enemy bullets inches overhead, wounded are cared for by medical corpsmen. Iwo Jima is conquered. Only isolated snipers remain. Its airstrips are already in use by American superfortresses. Atop Mount Suribachi, this flag is 625 miles from Tokyo.
You'll find that the titles of newsreels usually showcase American victories and not defeats. The most that they will do is give updates like these.
To win this tiny 8-square-mile area, 4,000 of them have died, and 20,000 Japanese.
Which will give a sense of the sacrifice it took, but the newsreel is only ensured to be released upon confirmed victory. My name is Eddie Gates from Channel 3 News, signing off. Now, the newsreels, in my opinion, they weren't that egregiously bad. Like, they weren't that propagandistic. As a matter of fact, they're kind of invaluable from a historical perspective because they got all of this footage from World War II, from the front lines. I mean, that stuff is great for historical buffs like me. But this wasn't the only thing that the Office of War Information was trying to get into. They were now going to try to break into the arts. And the way that they would do that is by trying to commission the creation of this very interesting series of posters, which I'm going to take you to go take a look at. As a matter of fact, let's just go to the art gallery right away. Yes, can I help you? The art gallery is not open for a little while now. Are you part of the guest list? Ah, well then, welcome, welcome. Please come right in, my VIP guest. Welcome to our humble little museum. Allow me to give you a sneak peek prior to the public opening. Now, what we have here is a collection of posters that were commissioned during the time period of World War II by the Office of War Information, one of their first attempts to get into the arts. This is a very, very important collection for the purposes of American history. Allow me to give you a brief tour. Come, I will show you series by series. The first series of posters that we have is a collection of posters that is meant to persuade the American men, specifically the white American men, to join the army. And you can see here, production wins wars, but we have a white male here. And it's not just him. Over here we have yet another poster that shows the ideal men. And over here we have yet another poster that shows, once again, the ideal man. And you can tell that the ideal man, he is built, he is strong, he has muscles. And what this is showing me is that these posters are trying to show the man that if he enlists inside of the army, he will come back and get all of the 1940s girls. And we do get those overtly sexual overtones. Maybe not so much in this first poster, but in this one, you literally say, get hot, keep moving. In other words, the women are watching. Or over here, man the guns, which is talking about the man's muscles as well as a literal cannon. So we can see that the advertisement towards men is trying to appeal to their sexual psychology. But it wasn't just about the men. We also had to convince the women to get part of the war effort, which brings me to my second series of posters. Over here, we have a series that touches on the women and how the women must be involved in the war effort. This is one of the most important posters in all of World War II and possibly the most popular. Her name is Rosie the Riveter, and she is trying to tell women, please get involved. Help your men while they are out away fighting and dying in the war. Please help them at home. Over here we have Keep 'em Flying Miss USA. Miss USA, of course, is a white woman who is typing away at a desk job that her man used to have, but which she must fill in for now. Over here, you have another woman, a typical housewife-looking woman, and it says longing will not bring him back any sooner. The reason they are saying that is because it is true. So they are telling the lazy woman, get a job. But not just any job, please get a war job. They must help in the war effort, and they must be convinced to help in the war effort. So we convinced them to take jobs that will help the international war effort. But it wasn't just about the men or the women, it was also about the racial component. There was race politics happening in America since its inception, the 1940s, and World War II is no different. Over here, we get a collection of posters which are specifically geared towards getting the black man to join the army. But you must remember, the black man in the 1940s does not have the same rights that the black man does today. And so the black man in the 1940s must be convinced to join an army, fight, and possibly to die for a country that does not recognize them as equal human beings. And perhaps one of the most controversial posters of the time, it wouldn't be controversial today, but at the time, a black man working with a white man, saying united we win. Back then, this was a very, very powerful, very, very controversial poster. But it showcases how during the time of war, we were already trying to pave the way towards the civil rights movement by showing the black men some sort of respect, because they love their country as much as the white man did. Now, come with me. There are a couple more series of posters down here. Down here we have the waste series. You can see right here, waste helps the enemy. And a very, very hilarious depiction of Hitler. And then perhaps my favorite poster of all time, right here, talking about carpooling to work. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. So please carpool to work. Both of these posters showcase how we are trying to micromanage Americans and make sure that they are actually paying attention to what they are using and making sure that there is enough supplies out there for the men in the army, who of course are the most important men because they are literally fighting the Hitler that everybody is scared of. However, in typical American fashion, there is also a series of posters that are quite scary, that use fear and intimidation to try to convince the people to act in the ways that they want. We have the beautiful little girl holding her beautiful little baby, and the hands of the Axis are creeping in, ready to take her, and it is telling us, keep these hands off. And how can we keep the hands off? But buying the victory bonds of the war, of course, by investing in America. And then we have this poster over here where we are fighting to prevent this. And what is this? It is a Nazi boot stepping on our religious freedoms. But of course, we have one more series which talks about the way that we want Americans to act. And the way that we want them to act is without vices. One of the great vices of the time is gossip. We don't want Americans to gossip because, as you can see here, this poor little puppy is very sad because her owner did not come home. And the reason the owner didn't come home is because somebody talked. We do not want people to gossip, and to get that point very, very evidently across, we are telling people it is literally costing lives. Over here, this woman, typical woman, is wanted for murder because her careless talk costs lives. We don't want gossip in this country, specifically not gossip about the soldiers. Now, with regards to the Office of War Information, there is one more thing. But the Office of War Information wasn't only interested in the arts through posters. It also wanted to break into Hollywood and have a certain level of control over the movie-making industry to project its message to the American people. So our old friend, Elmer Davis, the leader of the Office of War Information, started another department within this cabinet called the Bureau of Motion Pictures, which was meant to work with Hollywood to advance American messages. A film was deemed successful when it portrayed Americans or allies of the Americans as freedom fighters and advocated for any type of civilian participation, from donating food to joining the army themselves. In 1942, Elmer Davis shifted focus from other avenues of propaganda and began to focus nearly exclusively on this partnership with Hollywood, as he realized that the most effective way to shift the attitude around the country surrounding the war wasn't going to be through the news or through posters, but rather through entertainment that people chose to watch. And then by 1943, every single major Hollywood studio, with the only exception being Paramount Pictures, every single Hollywood studio was sending their scripts to the Office of War Information for review and approval prior to the release of any film. In other words, the government was almost unilaterally controlling the movies that people were watching during those years, and they were making sure that only pro-America movies would get made at that time. And this, of course, brings us full circle, right back to the beginning, to a certain American man who had a certain major Hollywood studio named after him. Walt Disney and Disney's production house was no different than all the other studios in Hollywood at the time, and they needed to make sure that they were joining the war effort and contributing positively to the messaging. So, in 1942, they began production on a new short film, one that was intended to sell war bonds to the American public, and one that would go on to win an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film. And the plot of this short movie? Donald Duck, the main character, has awoken to his normal daily life as a Nazi. The name of this film was Der Führer's Face, which is the same as the name of that song written for the movie, which ended up becoming the #3 song in America at this time. So this movie was a bit of an event within the culture. Now, of course, since this film was approved by the Office of War Information, it wasn't trying to glorify Nazi Donald Duck. On the contrary, we're given this hilarious sequence that shows Donald Duck having literally the worst possible daily routine of all time while trying to comply with Hitler's authoritarian rule. Let me give you guys a quick synopsis. The very first scene, where we see Donald sleeping, shows that even while he's sleeping, he needs to be Heiling Hitler. And then the alarm clock howls Hitler, and even the cuckoo bird has to heil Hitler. Then when Donald's finally awake, he makes coffee with a singular bean because he's so poor he can't afford more than one bean of coffee. And then he sprays his mouth with the aroma of bacon and eggs so that he gets the sensation of having a full meal while eating bread that is literally as hard as plywood. And then we get this first thing that Donald Duck does, which is exit the house and go to a factory that builds bullets for Germany.
Heil Hitler. Heil Hitler. Get to work.
But on the conveyor belt, there's also these pictures of Hitler, and every time he sees one of these, he has to do a Heil Hitler. And then in my absolute favorite sequence, Donald is rewarded for his hard work with a vacation.
Through the kindness of the Führer, now comes the vacation with pay. Ah, the beautiful Alps with the birds and the beautiful scenery. Not forgetting to build up the body so that we can work harder for the Führer. Heil Hitler. 1, 2, 3, Heil. 1, 2, 3, Heil. 1, 2, 3, Heil. 1, 2, 3, Heil. And now the vacation is over. By special decree of the Führer, Heil Hitler, you have been chosen to work overtime.
Eventually, Donald Duck wakes up from this horrible nightmare at the end of the film, and he realizes he's in America and he's just so happy to be here instead of in Nazi Germany. And he's so happy that he goes and he kisses the Statue of Liberty, and then end scene. Crazily enough, I think this film still holds up even to this day. I actually laughed a few times while watching it. But being that it portrays a beloved Disney character like Donald Duck as a literal Nazi, it didn't get a home release until 60 years after its actual initial release in theaters, when it was released on DVD as part of a classic Disney collection. And so, most of us don't realize that our very good ducky friend once played a Nazi for all of America to see. If you want to watch the whole video, which I highly recommend, the link is down in the description below. And that, my friends, is my short, kind of long story about how a song about Heiling Hitler ended up in my Apple Music playlist, and how a film where Donald Duck was a literal Nazi was released and loved by Americans back in the time of World War II. Anyways, that's my spiel for this video. If you guys made it this far into the video, please like and subscribe. It would help me out so much in the algorithm. And additionally, if you'd like this video, may I recommend the best gore video that I made, which got age-gated for some reason, but if you like this content, I'm pretty sure you'll like that one too. Go give it some love. Anyways, guys, I appreciate any attention that you give this video. Stay beautiful, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.
I know I got swag. I know it's